Hey everybody, it's Julie, and today's topic is going to be bios. If you've ever had to submit a piece of writing, like a query letter or some kind of application or something writing related where you're asked to include a bio, you may be wondering, what are you supposed to put in that? And the answer will vary depending on, of course, what you're submitting for and what it's associated with. But I'm going to go over 5 quick guidelines for what I would recommend you keep in mind when you're crafting a bio, and we'll see where it goes here. Now, I'm not any kind of big bio writing expert, but I have seen an awful lot of query letters, and query letters generally do have at least a little bit of biographical information, so this will probably be specifically a good set of items to apply to your query letter bio crafting, but it can be applied in other areas as well. The 5 keywords you want to keep in mind while you're crafting your bio is 1. Be brief. 2. Be relevant. 3. Be humble. 4. Be recent. And 5. Make it tailored. 1. Brevity. Now, you always want to err on the side of making it shorter rather than longer, because nobody likes listening to people ramble about everything they've done, especially when it isn't relevant, which is the second item on my list. You should aim for a couple of sentences in a query letter, and especially if you have a specified amount of words that they want you to stick to, you should always try to come in under that or right at that. You should never go over, because that's the window that they're telling you to fit your bio information into. So you always want to try to make it really bite-sized. This is not really the place or the time to tell people all about you. And I think that actually makes a much better impression, and just keep in mind that an agent or somebody that you might be submitting work to, like an editor, if they want to know more, they can ask you. And there are often places where you can mention that you have a website or you have a Twitter or something like that, so that if they really want to find out more about you, they can do that. 2, let's talk about relevance. What is relevant tends to vary, of course, depending on what you're submitting. In a query letter, of course, I would recommend that most, if not all, of your biographical information should be about writing or writing-related things that you have done. If you got a writing-related degree, if you've taken a writing-related course, if you have any previous publications, and if you have any other affiliations within the writing community, with any relationships with other writers, other editors. You don't want to be telling them about your critique partners and how many people edited your stuff. You don't want to tell them about non-professional interactions, although if you want to mention that you sometimes read and comment on other writers' work, if you have like a critique partner situation going on, if that's kind of one of your hobbies, you can mention it, although it's better if you happen to have professional qualifications that you can mention instead. You should also keep in mind that sometimes things that sound like writing credits are not really writing credits. If you have a blog, that's great, but talking at length about the kinds of things you publish on your own blog is not all that helpful unless it's part of your platform. And if you're pitching nonfiction, you may be in need of some proof that you have a platform. So it's going to vary depending on your situation, but relevance is kind of a hairy issue, especially for those people who are just getting started. If you don't have any kind of writing experience, you might want to say 1 or 2 things about what has informed your perspective on writing this novel or this piece of writing. If you have a background in the field that your character has a background in, or if you've studied the group of people you're writing about, something like that, you can mention it. It's actually advised that you should mention it so that you can show that you're doing this from an informed perspective. But other than that, there's no harm in maybe making half a sentence or 1 sentence about your personal life, like where you live and that you have a couple of kids or something like that. It's a nice little ending to a personable introduction, but for the most part, you should really focus on keeping it relevant to your writing career or to the subject of the piece that you're submitting. 3, let's talk about humility. I've seen an awful lot of bios in query letters where writers are straight up bragging about themselves. Now, there is a difference between listing achievements that you have and bragging. So the difference there is if you list reviews that you've received from professional reviewers, you can quote those reviews, you can say you won this, you can say you came in this place in a contest, you can just state things that are established or quote other people's words, but don't call yourself brilliant, don't call yourself the next big voice of your generation, don't compare yourself glowingly to existing and popular writers. You really need to avoid sounding like you think you're more amazing than you are, because that's really for other people to determine. And you should probably do your best to stay away from assuring the agent or the editor or whoever's going to be receiving your work of how amazing they're going to find the work, because it should speak for itself. And usually they're going to assume that somebody who has to brag about their achievements probably doesn't deserve those accolades. 4, let's talk about keeping it recent. Now, recent is going to be relative depending on what you're submitting, but especially if you're a writer who has a fair number of publications or a fair number of qualifications for something, you really don't need to list everything, especially the oldest stuff. I would order it by the most impressive qualifications first, but if all things are equal, you should say things that you've done recently, and you should always try to mention something that you've done within the last year, publication-wise or associated with your subject-wise, because otherwise it's going to look like you're kind of trying to ride your own coattails on something, that you're dragging glory from a long time ago into the now, and that you aren't really relevant anymore if you had to go this far back and you don't have anything recent to mention. So really try to keep your stuff to recent achievements and recent activities and publications if you have that choice. And 5, let's talk about tailoring. Mostly when I say tailoring, I'm talking about tone-wise. You want to try to match the tone of your bio with the tone of what you are pitching to. For the most part, I would say err on the side of professionalism, but there are times when being casual or being humorous can actually work for you. This is going to be a judgment call, but sometimes some familiarity and some casual speaking can really go a long way in showing a publication or an individual in publishing that you understand who they are or what they're about. So maybe an example could be if you've had some interaction with an agent on Twitter and they seem to be more of a more irreverent sort, or perhaps if you're submitting to a funny magazine and they have a blog about their topic that makes you think they would appreciate sort of a more humorous version of a bio. You can be self-deprecating or make a joke or phrase something a little bit quirkily, and that can sometimes help, but overall you want to tailor what you say about yourself to the audience, and that's going to be largely up to you as to how much to do it. But if you have a question about whether it's appropriate and you're just not sure if they would get it or if they would be feeling it, it's probably better all around to avoid it if you're unsure. So those are the 5 things I want you to keep in mind when you're writing your bios. And just for the record, as with any kind of publication submissions, you should always proofread, you should always read it over, read it out loud to yourself, show it to at least one other person to make sure it reads okay before you send this kind of stuff anywhere. That goes for anything you submit. And for any authors out there who already have a web presence, maybe on your website you might think about having a section for bios. If you don't already have this, you might offer several different bios labeled by category. Here's my 2-sentence bio, here's my writing-related bio, here's my personal bio, just for maybe people who might want to quote you or people who might want to understand more about who you are to choose from. And this also kind of suggests that you're ready to be represented in some kind of online place or to be quoted, you have everything ready for them. So if they ask you for it, it's there for them to pick from for something that is more appropriate for their publication. So I recommend that you do that. So if you have any questions about bio writing, go ahead and put them in my comments, and I will see you next time.